Hello, Visionaries. This is your host, the INFJ Visionary, bringing you another broadcast. The, I guess, nominal topic of this broadcast will be the shadow, but we're going to hit on quite a few different things. We did talk about the dark side and the shadow in a previous broadcast, but we're going to be revisiting the same ground repeatedly here since the things that we have to deal with in our lives are persistent, to say the least. I was listening to a very interesting broadcast from a lady just recently, and she was talking about the AI, and she was saying how some people are having these. Well, first of all, they're completely losing themselves in one hand, and then other people are having these transformative enlightenment events with the AI. And she was pointing out, very accurately, in my opinion, that the AI acts much as a mirror to us, and as we interact with it, all the different parameters that it can function in become narrower and narrower, so it becomes increasingly a mirror of ourselves. But the very interesting point that she brought up, and what she'd done is she drew like this pyramid shape and said that represents, with a circle in the middle, she said that represents your individuality. A little later on, she drew some little dotted lines out from the bottom of the pyramid and extended the pyramid so it was twice its size. And she said, this is the shadow. This is the stuff that most people don't look at unless they've done the work to look at it. Now, I've done some of that work, but we'll keep going. She says the AI ends up seeing the identity even if you don't think you are giving much away, just in the way you phrase your questions, maybe even the way you might put a period in there. All of these things give the AI an idea of who and what you are, what your identity is. And what identity is fascinating. It's not just the physical body, of course, or our ancestry, or the thoughts we think. It's everything. It's a giant gestalt of what we are. And increasingly in the modern world, it's the thing that is going to be very important for you to understand. What is your identity? Anyway, getting into this dark shadow, she mentioned that the AI does not only see the identity that you see, it also sees your shadow. And what may happen with some people is that it starts reflecting their shadow back at them. Now, why is some part of you the shadow? Well, it could be that it was traumatic. It could be that you just prefer to ignore that aspect of yourself. It could be these functions that we don't use that frequently, or that when we use them in negative ways or fearful ways. It could be a lot of fear that gets buried. Um, I am on record in a previous broadcast of saying, and it's not my original idea, but since I've read this idea, I think it's got a lot of value to it, and that is that we cannot afford the luxury of having a shadow, and that's becoming increasingly clear in the modern world, where you have AI reflecting this shadow back at you and possibly putting you into a traumatic, fearful, or even AI induced non-reality. Now, this isn't an AI centered broadcast here. It's an INFJ centered broadcast, but we're all going to be dealing with these things, and I think the AI gives us a very great insight into ourselves, because it's been created as a reflection of humanity from everything we've written, everything we've said, and increasingly everything we've filmed or recorded. So it's our mirror. It's our shadow, in a sense. It's our echo. Now, you can use this in a positive or negative way, and as I stated, it's not the purpose of this broadcast to focus on AI. But I would like to talk a bit more about the shadow and what it is. To me, it's the things that we do not bring into conscious awareness. Does it have to be fearful? I don't necessarily think so. It's fine to have a preference for how you want to deal with things, and it's fine to have the manifestation of fear occasionally. And when you do, I think the best thing to do when the fear has got you is to see it for what it is and don't run from it, and just say, okay, well, I have some fear about that, but whatever. Don't lie to yourself. Self-deception will probably be the topic of a future broadcast. But we're mostly talking about the light and the dark. So you want to do work on your shadow. You want to bring things into the light. If you had trauma in your past, you want to relive it. Now, you could go see a psychotherapist. I never have, but I've done a lot of reading and I've done a lot of contemplating about my life and existence. And I had, pretty decent childhood. But like all of us, there's always going to be some trauma involved. The worst thing that happened to me mostly is that my father ignored me for the most part. And that, as far as traumas go, isn't so great. It could have been worse. The guy could have been beating on me. Anyway, I was able to reconcile that. I was able to say, well, I can see what his issue was. And, I love the guy. He's gone now. But I made my peace with him and with that trauma before he passed. And therefore, it's not there to work in the shadow and cause me to act in certain odd ways to maybe get attention or things like that. I don't even know all the ways it could manifest, but I do think that trauma should be. The problem with psychotherapy, I think, is that reliving the trauma in a therapy session could be not the way to go, and it doesn't mean that you're going to reconcile it just because you relived it. Just because you remembered it and brought it up into the conscious. But there is value to the idea of bringing it up into the conscious. And I think what you should do is maybe this idea of the inner child is valuable in this way, because it's the inner child is going to be that traumatized younger version of yourself that needs to be given love and reconciled, brought into the fold, so to speak, not living there in the dark and every now and again undermining your efforts in the light. This is what happens if you don't reconcile the shadow. Just thinking of other places. Well, we have a myriad of fears, some of which are founded and some of which are unfounded, or more so that it's not that they're unfounded, it's that they will not ever really truly come to pass. So we spend a lot of time worrying about things. And I think for the INFJ, that could be a case of worrying about what people think of us, worrying about the value that we're giving other people, worrying about our legacy. That's one for me anyway. Worrying about recognition of our gifts. That could be another one. And is that a fear? Well, it's good to be recognized for your gifts. It's good to be an acknowledged part of the culture and society. In our case, I think the INFJ is much like the shaman in the old world cultures. In the old tribal cultures, we live apart somewhat, and we are in many ways like the really right up in front of humanity. We are the ones seeing what's coming and preparing humanity for it. And quite often, if we're not being heard and we're not being acknowledged for that wisdom and insight that we bring, that's hurtful. And it's really hurtful because of that extroverted feeling function. If we could somehow not get too involved with that, I think that's the best way to go, and that's my approach personally. I just put things out there like I'm putting this broadcast. And if you get something from it, great. And if you get something from it, I mean it. That is great. It doesn't matter if it's one of you or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000. Each one of us is doing our bit. Anyway, that's it for today's broadcast. And until I make it back here for another INFJ, God bless you, and fight the power.